Hey guys, I'm Julie Steppen here for QuakeUnity.com and QuakeLive.tv. Here with a special guest today. So would you introduce yourself and tell you what your role is?
Sure. My name is Paul Wedgwood. I'm the CEO of Splash Damage and the game director on Brink.
Okay. Can you tease us with any information in regards to Brink and the overall storyline?
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, the idea behind it is that Brink is a brand new title from Bethesda Softworks. These are the guys that made, you know, Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout 3. Designed and developed by my studio, Splash Damage, and we're the guys that made the Enemy Territory games, and then built on id Software technology. In the game, you take on the role of a combat guy involved in a really kind of horrific civil war, and it's taking place on the Ark, which is essentially an immense artificial floating city built at sea as part of a kind of contemporary green vision, but now existing around 2045, and having lost contact with the rest of the world, with resources now running low, you have this isolated and horrific conflict taking place between two factions. And so essentially you choose your side and you get involved in that battle.
Well, that's very cool. And with your previous title, Enemy Territory, Quake Wars was very unique. What attributes did it bring to the concept and development of Brink?
Well, I think as a development company, we're known, you know, for being a pretty much kind of hardcore multiplayer shooter developer, specifically, you know, on the PC and not consoles in the past. And around the end of 2007, we'd finished Enemy Territory Quake Wars, and we knew we wanted to have just like a really big new challenge and create a completely original and new game. And we wanted to bring other elements into that game as well, so that we could really just kind of feel like we were advancing the genre. We were really big fans of Bethesda, and we started talking to those guys about the potential for making something really, really ambitious. And then at the beginning of 2008, we announced that partnership, that we were now going to be making that transition from, you know, pure PC game developer to a multi-platform game developer, but with Bethesda Softworks' help and mentoring. And that's really the result of that game. And I think those kind of role-playing game elements of Bethesda games, you can see where we've taken our inspiration from those with Brink. Because in Brink, you start out with a character, you know, who's essentially pretty generic. And you can make changes to the way he looks. So you can have like a crazy looking face, or you can play a really big guy who can take more damage. And then you can start to customize finer details like facial hair, scarification, face paint, tattoos, and then earn really cool combat outfits and stuff. Now, traditionally with a shooter, the way that you look isn't really, with a first-person shooter, isn't really represented in the way that the game plays, because you can only see down the barrel of your gun. But in our game, we're blurring the lines between offline play and online play, so there is going to be a definite opportunity for other people to see this kind of badass character that you've created. So what we do is we have this character that you start out with at the beginning, who's kind of fairly generic, as I said at the start, who then plays through the campaign either as resistance or security, so you can witness both sides of the battles and their different perspective on stuff. And then by the time you come online, you've got someone really kick-ass that you've been creating, you know, playing offline or playing through your kind of single-player experience.
Can you still play single player offline and still have it contribute to their persistent stats?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really the whole point of the game. You know, we're just as frustrated as everybody else, you know, with our past work, where, you know, if you were playing online and you'd get like a whole bunch of attributes and stats and stuff, and then you'd get to the end of a campaign and they'd reset. And this is true really of other first-person shooters, you know, where you play through the game, you get to the end of the single-player campaign, and then when you start online playing, you're kind of stuck with a new character again and having to create everything again. Brink blurs those lines, not just because of the persistent character that I'm talking about, but also because up to 7 of your friends can drop into the game with you at any time. So you could be kind of like just got home from work and you're playing the game and enjoying yourself, and you've been playing for an hour, and then another friend gets back from work and he might have already finished the whole resistance and security campaigns, but when he gets home you can just click invite and he can drop straight into the game and start playing alongside you with that badass character that he's created. And then the 2 of you later that evening could go online and just jump into a game where everybody playing is a real person, and you've still got all of those attributes and abilities and cool weapon unlocks and that outfit, you know, that represents the kind of level that you've achieved.
So Brink has been announced for the PS3, 360, and PC. Are all three being developed in-house at Splash Damage?
Yeah, and I think that's something that was pretty important to us as well. When we finished Enemy Territory Quake Wars for the PC, the next title that we worked on, we wanted to do with a partner that had experience of shipping multiple multi-platform AAA games developed in-house so that they would be able to mentor us through that process as well. And this is because when we started out with the design for the game, we knew from the very beginning exactly what it was going to be, and it was going to be exactly the same on all three platforms, the same great game. In the past, I think our games had, we'd had ports and things like that, but you don't really have kind of as much control, and we absolutely wanted to have control over all three platforms and design a game which was the same great game, irrespective of whether you're playing on a 360 controller on an Xbox, or a PS3 controller on a Sony PlayStation 3, or playing just on a mouse and a keyboard with a PC.
And with that, what challenges did you and your team encounter in the cross-platform process?
Well, I think we kind of went through the typical technical due diligence that most developers do before they start a game, to try and eliminate risks and work out what the really significant challenges were. And we knew that we wanted to develop some really cool new technology like sparse virtual texturing that lets us store just masses of detail and use that source library for just a much greater level of visual fidelity on screen. We knew that we wanted to do proprietary technologies like the smart system, but in many cases those things don't have like direct or specific impacts on specific platforms. So as a studio, I suspect the most difficult challenge for us was always going to be that transition to PS3, just simply because as a PC game developer, Microsoft's Xbox 360 is kind of closer in standards and stuff to what you've been doing already.
Okay. In an interview, Edward Stern mentioned that networking for the console platforms would be peer-to-peer based with no servers. Is this only for custom game content sharing, such as textures, or in substitution for host game servers?
I think that the frank answer is that we're actually pre-alpha, and Ed knows about as much about networking as I do about World War II specialist combat history. So he probably spoke slightly out of turn there. We don't have specific definitive decisions made at this stage in the project for how we're going to handle networking. Certainly in the office we play peer-to-peer, we play on dedicated servers, so the game doesn't have any real specific impact on what method we're going to use. I think the challenge is really just going to be one of infrastructure and platform holders and the way that we work those things out. Certainly on the PC, we plan on having a dedicated server, and you couldn't really not have one because you have the Windows firewall and it just doesn't support peer-to-peer easily.
Okay, and we love your team's currently hurling controllers, blog entries. What games interest you today?
I think funny enough, the thing I've been playing most recently is not a game that you would typically find me playing. I've been playing loads of Fight Night Round 4, and I am neither a fan of fighting games or a fan of boxing. So it wouldn't be the kind of typical thing that you'd expect me to be kind of requesting from the Splash Damage games library. But just something about it kind of got me interested, and I started playing, and to be honest with you, my first 5 minutes, I just got my ass kicked by the computer, and I just thought, this isn't going to be that kind of challenging or interesting an experience. But as I started to get into the game, it just kind of starts to suck you in really interesting ways. And I think that's the great thing about video games in general. You can often be surprised by a genre that you haven't played before, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with Brink. We're trying to take, first and foremost, shooter fans, make sure they have a really, really cool experience. But in addition to that, we want people that haven't played shooters to play our single-player shooter for the very first time by taking advantage of our really cool movement system. And then we want to take those shooter fans that haven't played multi-player shooters before and get those people online and have them start playing. And I think if we can be as successful as a boxing game at convincing me that I should play something different, then we'll be in pretty good stead. And
do you have any shout-outs that you'd like to make to the community?
I'd just say hello to everybody at the enemyterritory.com community forums, everybody at the splashdamage.com forums, and just continue having fun and playing cool games.
All right, and one more quick question. How did Splash Damage do in the MCV Games 5's football tournament?
Yeah, we did really well on the strength of the first game that we played. So, of course, it's a huge knockout tournament, and the goal is to try and win lots of games in sequence. If you judge us just on the basis of that very first pre-group, pre-knockout tournament, I think we did absolutely fantastically. And then we got our asses kicked by Bethesda Softworks, and I'm not talking about that at all anymore.
All right. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Thank you for having me.